All right, look, I recorded a podcast yesterday, and in that podcast, I discussed a variety of different topics when it comes to combat sports. One of the things that I obviously covered was UFC 249, the cancellation of the event, and the fallout behind and the chain of events that caused the cancellation. One of the things that I touched on within that topic is MMA Media and the role that MMA Media played in the cancellation of UFC 249. The reason why I'm recording this video now is because I don't feel like I kind of made my points clearly and concisely. If I'm totally honest, I felt a bit flat yesterday. I felt a bit kind of low on energy, and I don't think I formulated my sentences very well. I'm not the kind of person to post something and delete it. So if you want, you can go down in the description and you'll see a whole host of different links to different podcast platforms, and whichever one you use that link to listen to the podcast for yourself if you want to. But yeah, so that's kind of what I wanted to cover off in this video, because looking on Twitter, I've seen two main kind of accusations leveled towards MMA journalists. The first one being they played a role in the cancellation of the event by covering UFC 249 with a negative outlook. And the second thing that I've seen is people saying that these MMA journalists are happy and they're celebrating the fact that the event is now cancelled. The journalists in question are the usual suspects: Luke Thomas, Ariel Helwani, Sean Al-Shatti, and this one other guy called Trent Rainsmith. Trent Rainsmith is a journalist that I wasn't aware of before last week. He works for Bloody Elbow, and in fact he wrote an editorial, I think yesterday he posted an editorial saying that it might be time for UFC President Dana White to go. Now, I've read the editorial and I think it's complete and utter nonsense. I think there's loads of flaws in his opinions and arguments, and I might make a separate video just discussing where I think he's incorrect. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here today to talk about the lead up to UFC 249 and the immediate fallout, and the kind of accusations that MMA journalists are kind of are getting from MMA fans. So look, my position during this whole kind of chain of events was I was conflicted. I was 100% conflicted because in my heart I wanted the event to go ahead because I'm a fan of the sport, and I'm bored. I'm bored of not having any fights to look forward to. I'm bored of not having any football to look forward to. And this was kind of like a silver lining in a cloudy time in history at the moment. Do you know what I mean? So in my heart, I wanted it to go ahead, but in my head, I was kind of finding it difficult to reconcile all of the different questions and the quite obvious risks around UFC 249 proceeding in a time where coronavirus is taking so many lives and causing so many issues. And one of the things that I did see around around kind of all of this going on, which was, I believe it was last week, was when Luke Thomas posted a video basically talking about the negative feedback he's been getting for raising what I believe are genuine questions. He even listed out a load of different questions, and you can go and watch that video for yourself. And looking at that in hindsight, you understand his kind of position during this chain of events. And for me, the kind of questions he was asking with regards to what kind of tests are going to be put in place for fighters, to make fighters' resources involved in the event, to make sure that they don't show symptoms of coronavirus. If someone does show symptoms, how will that be managed? There was a whole host of genuine questions that he asked, and I agreed with the stuff that he was saying. Now look, I'm not the biggest Luke Thomas fan in the world, but one thing I can say is I respect the way he covers the sport, because I don't believe he does it from a biased standpoint. I believe he looks at each situation and covers each situation from an objective point of view. Now, I don't want to follow a sport, or I don't want people to cover a sport that don't hold the UFC to a level of standards that we believe, or society might believe, are morally or ethically correct. Does that make sense? I don't want to just blindly I don't want to kind of go to MMA media outlets that just blindly follow the UFC and agree with everything that the UFC are doing. These are the same guys that give platform to fighters, to managers, to whoever that might have a grievance with the UFC. They interview people that have an issue with Dana White at given times and give them a platform to voice their side of the story. I follow Arsenal Football Club. I don't follow Arsenal Football Club blindly. Like, I love and support Arsenal, but if the owner does something incorrect, I'm gonna speak about it. I'm gonna call them out on it. If a player does something I don't agree with, I'll definitely say, no, you shouldn't have done that, or you shouldn't have said that. If the manager makes an incorrect decision, I'll say the manager fucked up. He shouldn't have done that substitution, or he shouldn't have substituted that player for who he ended up doing that substitution for. Does that make sense? So just because I love Arsenal Football Club, it doesn't mean that I will follow everything that anything connected to Arsenal Football Club does in a positive way. That's not how things work. That's not how life works. Like, when it comes to MMA Media, do you just want a bunch of schmoes covering the sport who will just lick Dana White's arse at every given opportunity, who will just say that whatever the UFC are doing is correct, is right? Like, you can't, like, how do you want it? Like, what is it that you're actually looking for when you're accusing these journalists of being incorrect in their actions? It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, saying that MMA journalists caused the cancellation of the event, for me, is very, very, very short-sighted and shows that you live in this MMA bubble. Because the reach and the power that the Luke Thomases of this world have are fairly insignificant when it comes to the grand scheme of things. I can't ever remember an MMA journalist causing Dana White to stray from an action that he was going to take, or stopped him from taking an action that he spoke about taking. It's never happened. Now, in all of this, Dana White did say that MMA Media are I don't know the exact word, but I'll just say he called them pussies, for lack of a better term. But the only journalist that he directly kind of commented on, or kind of he directly addressed, was a guy that works for the New York Times. Now, this guy is a guy called Kevin Draper, and I've just had a little look on the New York Times website. And it says here, Kevin Draper is a sports business reporter for the New York Times, covering the leagues, federations, owners, unions, stadiums, and media companies behind the games. So effectively, all he does is comment on the business behind sport. That's all he does. And in a time where every single mainstream sport has downed tools and said, we're not moving forward until we know more about the coronavirus and we can manage the risks around the coronavirus effectively, the only sport ploughing forward was the UFC. So just looking at the New York Times website, of the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces he's written since March the 12th, 3 of them have been about the UFC, and specifically UFC 249. He wouldn't have been writing about the UFC. He wouldn't have been questioning the UFC if the UFC weren't ploughing forward and trying to stage a show on April 18. The questions that he raised in these articles, and I haven't read all of them, but I've kind of skimmed through them, and I've seen little excerpts of them on Twitter, and I saw Kevin Draper tweeting little pieces from one of his articles and kind of questioning Dana White for saying that the article is full of lies. And some of the stuff that he said now, in looking back with hindsight, he was correct. He was correct in saying that it was going to be at Tachi Palace. He was correct in some of the kind of assumptions that he made during, like, in the article itself. And he called Dana White out on it, and said that he wants to have an interview with Dana White. He wanted comment from the UFC, which they declined, right? So I believe the reason why Dana White directly addressed this article is because he kind of realized that this is actually the mainstream media, and this might cause a negative impact on UFC 249 going ahead, which it seems now it did. Do you know what I mean? So where you're sitting there arguing and kind of personally kind of tweeting people like Luke Thomas and Ariel and Sean Al-Shatti and telling them that it's their fault that the event isn't going ahead, you need to wake up and smell the coffee. Talking about how these journalists are celebrating the fact that the event isn't going ahead. They're not celebrating. Like, talking about how they're happy that fighters are not going to get paid because of their actions. Luke Thomas and Ariel Helwani have been vocal. They've been vocal about the fact that they think the UFC should put some form or a package in place to support their fighters financially while the UFC is on a hiatus because of the coronavirus. What more do you want them to do? What more do you want them to say? Like, in all of this, right? In all of the different things that have happened over the last couple of weeks, right? I can't really fault what Luke Thomas has said, what Ariel Helwani has said, what Brian Campbell has said, what Sean O'Shea has said. I haven't personally seen anything that I can sit there with an open mind and say, you know what, that they're wrong here. They shouldn't have said that. They shouldn't have done that. The only thing that I've seen that I feel is personal, that is a personal attack on Dana White and the UFC, is this editorial from this gentleman, Trent Rainn. Or like, that is the only thing that I've seen that I think that's not really right. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Like, you guys really need to have a day off when you're having a go at MMA Media, because if you want the MMA Media to just be puppets and just follow blindly every single action the UFC have, you're taking the one kind of platform that fighters have to voice their concerns whenever something happens in their career that they don't necessarily agree with. You're kind of making that platform lose the very little power that it has, in my opinion. And that's kind of the crux of what I wanted to say. Like, people around, when it comes to MMA fans, look, I know people all come from different backgrounds. They have a different outlook on life. I know a lot of people are sitting here talking about, oh no, we all need to go back to normal life because of the economy and this, that, and the other. Like, I understand, I appreciate different opinions from different walks of life. But what I don't understand is personal jibes at journalists for them doing their job, just because what they're saying doesn't suit your agenda. So you need to man the fuck up, effectively. That's really the crux of it. Like, that is really it. Unless you've got a genuine argument, and unless you can back your argument up with facts and say this is why the event should go ahead, or this is why you're wrong, or this is why you shouldn't be covering this event the way you are. Unless you can actually do that, shut the fuck up. Because if all you're going to do is tweet Luke Thomas and tell him he's a pussy, or tweet Ariel Helwani and tell him that he's a cuck or a boomer, whatever the fuck these words mean. Like, I don't even know what they mean. Like, that's what people use on Twitter. I don't know if it's an American thing or what, but you lot are a bunch of dickheads, to be fair. Bunch of dickheads. But yeah, I suppose that's really all I wanted to say. You lot just need to have a day off. This is a genuine issue that is being dealt with by, like, it's a global issue that's being dealt with by people. Like, there's people dying here. There's people dying, and there's things that are more important than an MMA event going ahead for our entertainment. Yeah, that's kind of really all I wanted to say. Put your comments below. Don't be scared to like this video. Don't be scared to dislike this video. If you think I'm talking absolute shit, comment below why, and hit the thumbs down button. If you think I'm talking sense, hit the thumbs up button. Share it with a friend if you've enjoyed it, or if you haven't enjoyed it, share it with a friend and tell them, look at this dickhead, look what he's talking about. Do you know what I mean? If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you on the next one.